Fader ure, southeastern heavenen, si thin nami halged, do becometh in riche, je werdeth in wille, on erden swan heavenen. Ure Fader, south art in heavene, halged beth in nami, the kingdom come to, beth I wille dawn, on erde as in heavene. Ure Fader, that art in heavene, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come to, beth I wille dawn, on erde as in heavene. Ur Father, that art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, that art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, that art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Hello, this section of the video will just be notes on what came before, so if you were just here for the accents, feel free to click off. The first thing I'll say beforehand is if you want to incorporate historical accent into a film, or just any kind of accent work really, I do dialect coaching for films. I now have a little bit of experience. This year I was lucky enough to work on a project with some big actors. I was privileged to be afforded that opportunity. It's on IMDb, so I think I probably could say what it was, but I don't want to push it, so I won't. But I've built up a bit of experience doing that, so I have my email address in the description if you did want to approach me about something like that. I would probably have to ask for a fee, but I'll do all kinds of things. I'll do interesting little indie projects or just anything, time permitting. So as far as the actual video goes, I won't go into all the details of Reconstruction because I've got other videos covering that topic in a lot of detail. The first question everyone always asks is, how could you possibly know what accents sounded like before sound recording? And the short-ish answer is that accents work in pretty systematic ways. They're not just random. They're not just this ethereal thing that gets layered over your speech. They're, on a physical level, your accent is entirely dependent on how you move your vocal muscles when you talk. So I say goat for this, animal, and a Scottish person from a certain part of Scotland might say something like goat. And that's not something magic that gets layered over the top of the speech. I am moving my tongue and lips in a certain way. So for the vowel, I'm going from to oo. I'm rounding my lips more as the vowel goes on. And I'm also moving my tongue from a central position to a high back position. O, O, whereas the Scottish person in this situation would be keeping their tongue in more or less the same place, fairly mid-height in their mouth and drawn back, and keeping their lips rounded throughout the whole thing. O, O. So accent is something we can describe, and phoneticians in English have been describing their own accents since about the mid-1500s. That's when we start to get sort of good descriptions emerging. So that's one way that we know, because people were describing it in quite a lot of detail. Before the 1500s, we have to use other techniques. We have to rely on spelling evidence. It's a lot less reliable, but we can still reconstruct a lot more than you might expect. Because, as I say, languages work systematically. Sound changes happen very systematically within the sound systems of languages. And so we can kind of triangulate the most likely set of sound changes that must have happened, and therefore what the language must have sounded like at each stage in its history. So it's not just randomly looking at spellings and coming up with guesses. It's a lot more systematic than that. You can watch my other videos if you want to learn more. As for the broad trends you might notice, at the very start of the video we're dealing with what's academically called Old English, sort of Anglo-Saxon English, which is impossible for most modern English speakers to understand, although my friend Colin Gorry has recently written a book which will hopefully make that easier. But Old English was very different from modern English in that it had a lot of inflectional morphology, and that means that words had all sorts of little endings to convey grammatical details. So the word heaven, you'll notice at first it starts off as something like helvenum, and this ending is a grammatical ending that tells you about the word heaven's relationship with other words in the sentence. Because English has always had very strong stress on the first syllable of a word, excluding prefixes, final syllables at the ends of words, tend to be less strongly pronounced. They tend to have weaker vowels, and so it's a lot easier for speakers to kind of just miss them or weaken them when they're speaking normally. And so over time, this led to the Old English grammatical endings being eroded away until they didn't exist anymore. And this is something you see in the video. You see the word heaven at first having this ending, which then just gets reduced to un, which then just gets reduced to and then it gets chiseled off entirely. The consequence of losing these grammatical endings is that you have to find other ways of conveying a word's position in the sentence. And so word order becomes a lot more strict. You'll notice changes in word order fairly early on in the video. And also you have to have lots of little auxiliary words like to and on and stuff like that to clarify the meaning of the word that follows. So that's the reason for that change. Another thing that you'll probably notice is that it starts to be a lot easier to understand around the kind of 1500 kind of mark. And this isn't actually because of any massive acceleration in sound changes. Sounds weren't changing much faster in this period, but there was this particular sound change where the long vowels of Middle English, the e, u, e, o, and a, all underwent this shift, which brought them much more in line with modern dialects. So although this was a fairly run-of-the-mill sound change, it's called a chain shift. They happen all the time in natural languages. It's just that there aren't any English dialects left that don't have this vowel shift. All modern English dialects have this vowel shift in one form or another, and so the consequence is that when you're listening to it going along, it suddenly sounds a lot more like modern English after this vowel shift happens. It's called the Great Vowel Shift. And there's plenty of resources about it online. I've made a video on it as well. So that's why it suddenly becomes a lot easier to understand. Another thing you'll probably have noticed is that around sort of 1700 to 1800, it suddenly sounds a lot more like what you'd expect a southeastern kind of London area accent to sound like. And one major reason for this is that it loses the r sound in a lot of positions. Now, some people have hypothesized on the internet that this was because English people suddenly decided they didn't want to sound like Americans anymore, so they deleted the R. This is not true. How would that even happen? Some royal decree can't cause people to change their accent all of a sudden. It's not how it works. And also we have evidence of this sound change gradually happening throughout the 1700s. phoneticians argue back and forth about whether you should or shouldn't pronounce the R in certain words. And it seems like it probably started off as a working class thing to drop these R's, and then gradually became more and more accepted in upper class speech towards the end of the 1700s. And it was a pretty London specific thing until well into the 1800s. Into the 1800s, most rural accents still pronounced the R in all positions where it was in spelling. So this R loss, turning the accent non-rhotic, is one thing that characterises those London accents nowadays, and it can make accents from before that time sound kind of Irish or American or West Country-ish from a modern perspective. But of course, at the time, they wouldn't have thought of it like that. Everyone in London pronounced their R's in 1600 or so, and so it wouldn't have seemed like a foreign or rural thing. It would have seemed normal. That would have been how everyone spoke, pretty much. But that change does sound like a jump in hindsight. I think that's probably everything that you're likely to notice on a first watching. But if anyone wants to ask about any particular decisions in the comments, feel free, whether it's from a perspective of knowing a lot about English history and why did you choose to do this, why did you choose to do that, or if it's just out of a general interest. No question is too silly. I'll be happy to answer anything. I don't always get around to answering everything. In fact, I usually don't. But I'll certainly go through and look at comments, especially over the next few days. I hope you're all having a good day, and I will talk to you soon.